Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're going to talk about this Spyderco Mannix 2 Lockback. This is a new version of the Mannix for 2017. I'm going to do my full review of this as a knife, that is this knife right here, but I've got these other two Mannixes with me because in addition to that, I want to talk about where this fits as a Spyderco and where it kind of fits into their overall lineup and all of that stuff. So probably be a little bit of a longer discussion. I'm not going to belabor any points, so I'll try to still be a little bit brief. And it should be a really fun video to kind of think through together. I'd love to hear your comments below about anything I say, but I would like to ask you this question. Have you already, or do you plan on buying one of these? Or in your mind, is it, you know, I don't need another Spyderco Mannix, okay? I'd really like to know that down below. Now, before I get into the comparison, let me move these guys out of the way. This, of course, is the original Mannix with the saber grind. Move this one over here, and this is the XL with the DLC coating. I move that over to this side. And now let's just talk about this particular knife on its own merits, okay? So I'm going to talk about this, you know, in sort of a typical review format, as if it wasn't a new variation. It was just, you know, a knife that came out and I was taking a look at for review. And then when we get to the comparison portion, we'll go back and sort of consider how it compares and where it fits into the overall lineup and whether this knife is something that needs to be done. I will make this suggestion right now, okay? I'm going to kind of hint at where I'm going with this. I do think this is very much in line with the heart of the Mannix design, okay? In fact, maybe if this was the one that was originally released, we would have had less complaints about it when it came out. So that's my little teaser. You'll see what I mean by that when we get up to talking about the other versions of the Mannix and things that are different on this and things that people have complained about, especially about the original. So let's go ahead and get started with this particular knife, Spyderco Mannix 2 Lockback, new for 2017, beginning with size and weight, the way we pretty well always do. Okay, so this knife is 8 inches overall. The blade on it is 3 3/8. The handle on it is 4 5/8, and it's actually just a hair over 4 5/8, but like not even something I could easily, like not even a 30-second, like it just barely crosses that line of the on the ruler at the 5/8 mark, okay? So it's really just over 4 5/8. What's pretty impressive about this is the weight, which is 4.4 ounces, and that has been an ongoing complaint about the original standard version of the Mannix. Moving on from size and weight, by the way, this carries really nicely. I've carried this quite a bit. I've carried it in a lot of different settings. You know, on a construction site, I've carried it just for EDC. I've carried it, you know, around the house in a pair of track pants or whatever, and it does carry quite nicely, and it is a rather utilitarian knife, and we'll talk about that as well when we get to lockup and deployment. But let's stick with blade for a moment. The blade on this guy is going to be a full flat ground drop point blade in S30V. It's 145 thousandths stock. It's 22 thousandths behind the edge, which makes it a pretty nice slicer. And you know, people have talked about thickening up the blade stock on this knife, and they have done that. But don't get the wrong idea about that, guys. This is not a thick blade stock. I should have brought something with really thick. Oh, okay. When we get to that, let me show you. So here's a knife with what I consider to have thick blade stock. This is the Curtis F3, and if I hold this up beside the Mannix, you can see that it's considerably thicker there, okay? So while this is thicker than the standard version of the Mannix, it's not by any means a thick blade stock. It's around the same as a Para 2, okay? Now, what do I think of this blade? Oh, one more thing. This is an interesting thing about the Mannix is, well, it's definitely a drop point blade. You can tell pretty easily by looking at it. If you notice, I'll put the knife down kind of straight across the screen. Notice how the blade is sort of canted downward, okay? So it's a drop point, but the drop is quite severe, almost making this knife act like a Wharncliffe, okay? So it kind of wants to be angled down toward, that is down like this, toward whatever you're cutting. And I find that quite a convenient relationship, that is blade to handle relationship for lots of different cutting tasks, right? The blade just naturally ends up kind of down toward whatever you're working on, which I do think is rather well done. Okay, so that's about relationship. We don't usually bring that up a whole lot. The edge geometry is very nice, typical Spyderco. Very fine point, which again is typical Spyderco, so you don't want to drop this knife, but that's true of a lot of knives, so I'm not going to take away too many points for that. The one thing I will take some points away for that I would be a complaint on any of the versions of the Mannix is you've got an 8-inch knife here, and of that 8 inches, only 3 inches is actual cutting edge. Okay, so you've got 5 inches of knife with not doing nothing, okay? I mean, it is very ergonomic, and they've made some sacrifices to get to that, to get it as comfortable in hand as it is, which they've done a great job on, by the way. But I'm a little disappointed in the blade to handle ratio on this knife, and we've said that about other Spydercos before. The Para 2 is famously poor for blade to handle ratio, although it does have a longer cutting edge than the Mannix has. All right. By the way, you guys know, you saw it a minute ago, there is a larger version. So if you really want that extra cutting edge, which I do like, there is that other option. So that's my take on the blade. S30V steel, by the way, very, very good steel. I'm not going to complain about that in the least. I know there are better steels out there. I know there are worse steels out there, but in terms of a high-end, good quality EDC knife, I think S30V is very well suited to that role. All right, now what else do we want to touch on for this? I think that's everything we have to say about the blade. Let's go ahead and talk about lockup and deployment. Again, this is very different, and it's not something we even see a whole lot from Spyderco. There are obviously some lockbacks from Spyderco, the Endura, Delica. However, none of them are this well done. Okay, this is a drop-free knife. Really, really appreciate that. It just brings me a lot of joy to actuate this lock and see the blade just drop into place like that. I really, really like that. In terms of, you know, the quality, the feel, everything is very, very good. There are a couple things I do need to say though. This is a knife you're going to open with sort of a rolling open, okay? It's not going to be able to be spider flicked, not even close. Even trying to thumb flick this knife does not work. Yeah, not going to happen. So it's only going to open, you know, kind of slowly and purposefully like this. It's very smooth, okay? The quality is excellent. The lock is comfortable to deploy, but you're not going to flick this knife. You can spider drop it. I guess that'd be about the closest thing to sort of a fast opening method that you can do. But it's not going to, you know, it's not going to do that kind of thing. Just won't do it. All right, and of course, standard size Manix as well does that nicely. And I'll say more about that, of course, when we get to the full sort of comparison segment of the video. Phosphor bronze washers, you know, adjustable by Torx. So all of those things are really, really nicely done. And I've got to say, the biggest thing to me that stands out about this lockback is just the overall feel of quality. Everything just feels very smooth and very polished and very purposeful, and that I've got to give Spyderco some real credit for. You know, we talk about the Taichung Spydercos being the ones that are really, really well made, but this guy, even though it's Golden Colorado, it's exceptional. Very, very nice fit and finish. And again, as you actuate this knife, everything just feels precise, and that's something I do get a lot of joy out of when it comes to carrying and using this knife. So that's lockup and deployment. You're not going to flick this knife in any way, but otherwise, very, very good. And by the way, that's a typical lockback thing. A lot of them don't kind of flick out very well because the lockback puts constant tension. So if you see how this goes, the blade tang is back here being pressed directly by that lock bar. Okay, so that's creating an awful lot of friction, and that's why you're not able to flick many lockback knives. Okay, not all, but many. Let's talk about the handle now. The handle is these thick slabs of G10. It's got backspacer construction combined with the lockback, which does fit nicely, okay? Like it looks very natural, like that's the way it was meant to be, and of course it was. There is, however, something interesting here, and that is no steel going on there. Okay, so these are just G10 scales, and you know, I've got to say, and I've said this a lot, I'm a big fan of the pure G10 choice. Yes, I know it's kind of taking a page from the cold steel playbook, But I really like Cold Steel's choice to do that, and the fact that this Spyderco in particular is following suit, I think is a great choice, and I think it allows them to do something cool with this knife. Again, I'll talk about this in a second when we kind of get back to the heart of this design. So I'm absolutely a fan of the just G10 scales here, and I'd actually like to see more knives done in that way, because I think it saves a lot of weight and it doesn't ask you to sacrifice anything in terms of strength or performance. Fairly fine texturing on this guy, definitely finer than any other Spyderco that I know of, or even Cold Steel or other knives. This is just a very fine, it's grippy, but it's definitely very fine, almost like fine sandpaper, you know, like a 600 or something like that. The jimping is very, very good, and the ergonomics, and this is why people love the Mannix as much as they do. The Mannix is one of the most ergonomic knives out there. It really just mates to the hand extremely well, either in the forward or either in the back sort of saber grip position or further up. Really, really nice both ways. So ergonomics on this guy, absolute total win. Okay, so let's see if there's anything else I'm forgetting to tell you about the, well, I guess I could mention, you know, it is a reversible clip, a 4-way, by the way, reversible clip rather than just 2-way. Non-tube lanyard hole, but nice and big, so you should have no problem getting paracord through there. And that's really about all I have to say about the handle. Overall, very, very pleased with the choice they made to go with the all G10 handle. And the ergonomics are, like any Mannix, very, very good. So now let's talk about this as it compares to the other versions of the knife, and specifically how it kind of fits in to what Spyderco was shooting for with the Mannix. So there are a bunch of versions of this knife available out there. There really are. I want to say, now correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments, but I want to say there are more variations of the Mannix than any other Spyderco. Now I'm excluding sprint runs there. So I'm thinking, you know, there's the XL, there's the standard, which now has a flat grind rather than this saber grind. There's this one, and then there's also the lightweight. So that's 4 different versions sort of in production at the same time. And I don't think you see that kind of thing very often. Perhaps the Native has that many variations. And then of course, in addition to, oh wait, there's still the Blurple to be added to that list as well. Sorry about the cough there. So yeah, that's 4 or 5 variations. So there's lots of different options when it comes to this knife. And so I'm reasonably confident in saying that there's more variations in full production of the Mannix than any other Spyderco, perhaps any other knife that's out there. I'm trying to think of another one that breaks that rule, but not too many are coming to my mind. I'm sure you guys can think of lots, and you're welcome to put those down in the comments below. So how does this compare to the original Mannix? Well, let's point out the original Mannix actually was a lockback, and this is probably, so this is a bit of a throwback to that, and in that sense kind of captures the heart of the knife a little more, since it was a lockback originally. The other thing, this knife was meant to be kind of an answer to Cold Steel, to make a knife that was very hefty, hard use, heavy duty, you know, that would really, you know, stand up to a lot of wear. And you may recall, if you were a Nut and Fancy fan for a long time, Nut and Fancy used to complain about the saber grind on here, and he used to talk about, you know, indicating to Spyderco and Sal Glesser that they should go with a full flat grind. Sal refused because he said, you know, this makes this a heavier duty knife. Now, of course, they've all gone to full flat grind, including this one, but the heavier blade stock, okay, they've switched the stock to a heavier stock, which is going to make this a little more robust. They've also gone with very heavy duty G10 scales. Again, very robust, okay? And that brings up one of the issues with this knife. This knife is only 8 inches long, and it's over 5 ounces, which is definitely heavy for its size. Now, it's not too much weight for me, but a lot of people had complained that they felt like that was too much weight for them. And so, you know, in some ways, the Mannix lightweight, which was a great knife, was an answer to that complaint. So people were saying, hey, the Mannix is a great design, it's super comfortable, it's a great size, I love everything about it, except it's too darn heavy. And so they came up with the lightweight, but with the lightweight you lost that heavy duty feel of the Mannix. So no more was it going to be this super tough, durable knife that would just take a beating and you know, you could just take anything the world could throw at it. Now you'd sacrifice that to get it lightweight. It was still a great EDC knife, but not in the same, you know, category as this knife. All right, so that's where I feel like this knife really excels. Here you don't sacrifice anything. You get all the heavy dutiness, all the utility, all the hard use character that you could want and that this knife delivers, but you get it at a much lighter weight of 4.4 ounces. Now, is that as light as the lightweight? No, not at all, but it's still pretty darn good. You also get a very comfortable knife. And so they've really taken that ergonomic thing and that ergonomic design and even expanded on it a little bit by making it a little bit wider. It makes it even more comfortable in hand. They've now allowed us to have either the two-position clip, which to me is not a thing because I would never want to carry my knife tip down, but for those of you who do, and if I was going to carry a knife tip down, a lockback would probably be more acceptable. All right. Finally, the last thing that I want to say is they've gotten this lockback that is very easy to actuate. And well, probably at this point, you're not hearing too much about this. I remember when the Mannix was new, and if you look around, you can still find a lot of this. A lot of people complained about how stiff that lock was. And it's actually a pretty stiff lock. The ball bearing lock in the Mannix was pretty stiff. And a lot of people complained about that. And this one, my XL, is even more so. It's very stiff. So I've really got to grip that to pull it back. I have never been able to do it one-handed. It always takes me 2 fingers like that. Now, it's not the end of the world because I've gotten used to it. But in terms of which of these knives is easier to actuate when it comes to the lock, there's no question that this is much more comfortable. Okay, I don't have to get into any weird hand position. I can just lay the knife down and away it goes. Where this, I definitely have to give some thought to how I'm going to get that guy closed. So the lock, again, answers a problem that people have had with the original Mannix. So that's where I think this one fits in. I think it's a really nice middle ground, and in some ways I think this should have been the knife that came out, I don't know, 5 years ago or so, however long ago it was that the Mannix 2 came out. It would have been nice to see something like this, although at the time, you know, Benchmade's Axis lock was so wildly popular that Spyderco wanted to be able to do something similar, and they went with the ball bearing lock, which is a good lock, by the way. Okay, so that's my take on those comparisons. Now let me get these out of the way, and we'll bring in a couple of other comparisons really quickly that I think are worth making. The steel wheel cut jack, I think, is worth taking a look at. If you like the ergos and the size and the weight on the Mannix, the steel wheel cut jack in the M390 is going to be somewhat similar. This, of course, is the FRN version, which is going to be much cheaper, but again, very similar in size and probably a little lighter. Another knife that stands out for sure as being very comparable, and I may have to do a full discussion between, full comparison between these two, is the American Lawman. A great knife, one of Cold Steel's best models, I think, and highly recommended. But again, it competes very closely with the Mannix. Let's bring in a couple of other Spydercos since we've kind of departed from that. This has been a kind of a Spyderco themed video, so in all fairness, we should bring out the Para 2, and there it is. So that's, again, another knife. Now that brings up one point, and that is about cost. This knife is a little expensive. I think they're about $130, $140 right now, and that's too much, okay? This knife goes for just over $100, and that's where they should have brought this one in. At the very least, they should have matched the price on the Para 2. So this guy's like $120. At the very most, this should have been $120, and I think it's about $10 more than that. So they're still in the ballpark, and I suspect you'll see that price come down a little bit in the not too distant future. One more Spyderco to share with you, similar size, much more cutting edge. So if you want something very lightweight with a lot of cutting edge, of course, you might want to look up the Sliverax. Pretty neat Spyderco. By the way, if you're watching this and wondering when I'm going to do my full review of this knife, it'll be coming up very shortly. Okay, so there you go, guys. That's my thoughts on the Mannix 2 Lockback. I really, really like this knife. I think it really captures what the Mannix 2 was meant to be all along. And I've got to say that from, you know, a user standpoint, I really, really like this knife. It does a lot of things for me that, you know, it just does. It does all the things the Mannix was supposed to do and does them just a little bit better as far as I'm concerned. Now, there may be those of you who disagree with me, and that's absolutely fine, and I'd love to have that conversation down in the comments below. Overall, I think this is a great knife. I think if you already own this Mannix, it's probably questionable whether or not you buy another one. However, if you don't have one yet, I would recommend this one. I really like it. It really balances out weight and size and a lot of other factors that we look for in an EDC knife. I think it's a real win from Spyderco. And I've got to say, other than my issue with the price, which I think is a little high, I do recommend it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.